Good morning, everyone. Okay, so today we're going to be writing our final part of our explanation text. I could see yesterday that lots of people had completed their introduction or had made some changes to the writing that they'd already started. Right, let's have a look at where we are then today. So this is what we should have done already, okay? If you haven't got all of these things, you need to ensure that you've got them finished for when you bring them into school next week. Just before we start, just a reminder that we're doing all of our work in our writing book and we're bringing it into school. You don't need to hand anything in today. So looking at the slide for today, this is what we've already done. So at the beginning of the week, you designed your own Christmas contraption. You could decide what you wanted to do. It might have been wrapping up presents. It might have been writing Christmas cards. It might have been making Christmas dinner. Then we started to think about what we were going to do with it. How were we going to explain how it worked? And we made our flow chart to make sure that we could do that. And our flow chart was just a simple, brief notes which told us what was going to happen. And then yesterday we wrote our introduction, which would include the question, a short description, and that let me tell you about a sentence, which was going to join it to the work that we're going to do today. So our next step now is to write the instructions, which will help us explain how the machine works. So our flowcharts were our notes to help us decide how our machine worked. It was a brief description. Now we need to add detail to our writing. I know that some of you have done this, so what I'd like you to do is to green pen your work, ensuring that you have enough details in your steps. Would someone understand how your machine worked from reading your explanation? I want you to take a few minutes to explain your machine to someone else, or if you've got nobody with you, to go through it in your head and to go through the steps. Can you picture what each step does? Does the person that you're explaining it to understand what is happening about your machine? I'm just going to give you a little bit of time to go through that and to do that. Okay, so hopefully you've managed to go through your flow chart, looked at what the sentence says, and then explain to somebody else what it means. Okay, we can't include it just as that as our writing because there's not enough information on it, and this is what we're going to try and do today. So okay, let's look at the first step from my flow chart. The letters are put into the chute. That was my part from the flow chart. I need to think about how and why questions. How are they put in and why are they put in? What I want you to do first of all is I want you just to have a look at that the letters are put into the chute. How would you try and expand that sentence? What would you do to make it so that people would understand what it was? Have a look at my description and see if you can write your own. Again, I'm just going to give you 1 minute to do it. Okay, so hopefully now you've had a go at writing mine into a more informative text. Okay, so let's just have a look at what I came up with mine. So I decided that they were going to be carefully poured into the chute. So I tried to describe a little bit more about what was going to happen. So I could have used synonyms for pour, such as tipped, or if it was going to go in really quickly, I could have used jetted. So when you come to do your sentence, have a look at those words that you're using. What other words could you maybe use instead? We've done a lot of work on synonyms recently, okay? And you might be able to find a better word to put in there. I then needed to think why we were going to do something. Remember, our explanation text is an awful lot about how and why. So it's important that this step is done, otherwise the letters would not start their journey to Santa. So I've started to add extra detail by including who would do this as well. So I've got the special delivery elf. So you can include different people within yours as well. If you notice, I've started mine with first because I'm trying to put in those time openers as well. So let's have a look at the next one. Then they go down the slide. So can we do the same again? Can you try on your whiteboards to write down an explanation of that, adding extra details? Okay, think about the how and think about the why. I'll give you 1 minute again. Okay, so I hope everybody's got a sentence written down. So we're not writing a story where we need lots of adjectives. We want to keep our explanation to the point, and our sentences need to give the information in a simple but informative way. So in this sentence, I'm telling people how fantastic my letter sorter is by telling them that it can sort hundreds of letters in a minute. I've also added the extra information about where the letter goes on its journey. It goes towards the flingomatron. One of the lovely things about inventing your own machines is that you can make up fabulous names for the parts of your contraption. What strange names are you going to include in yours? Because we're writing up the main part of our work today, I want you just to look back at our checklist that we had. So let's look at the features of the explanation text again. This is what you'll be referring to throughout your writing. That is your checklist. Okay, so we've talked about this quite a few times already this morning. Does your explanation answer the questions how something works and why we would need it, or why does it need to do that? Your work needs a clear title. You could maybe use your question as your title, or you could use the name of your contraption that you've made. Our ideas are grouped into paragraphs. So we've got our introductory paragraph that we did yesterday, and then we're using our different steps as the different paragraphs for our work. We're trying to use our causal and effect connectives. So we're using then or so, or if, because, as a result. In my first step, I managed to include because within my work. So check through and make sure that you're getting those things in. We're going to try and use some time connectives and openers, such as first, then, finally, and following. We don't need to use these in every single step though. Okay, so try and put some in, but don't overload it with them. And then we've got our action verbs to tell the reader what's happening. We mentioned about poured, and that we might use different words such as jetted or tipped. So think which verb would be the best verb to use within your work. So I want you to imagine that you're needing to convince people that your machine is the best thing that's on the market. Your writing must engage the reader and capture their interest. So hopefully your introductory paragraph that you wrote yesterday will be the thing that draws people in. They will think, wow, this sounds a fantastic machine. I want to find out more, and they want to read the steps that you've done. So you might want to imagine that you are in Dragon's Den and that you need to explain your machine and how it will work in the hope of receiving some money for your project. Just have a think, take a minute. Would somebody want to have your machine? Have you come up with some ideas that are different to everybody else's, that you've told people about in a really exciting way? Just take a minute. And then finally, what I've done is I've included an example text so that you can use it as an additional checklist or even a waggle. I want you to think about how you're going to set out your work to make it more interesting for the reader. And you need to remember to include your diagrams in there as well. I'm really looking forward to seeing all of your machines next week when we're back in school, and it will be lovely to hear you tell us about them. Okay, if you do finish everything, then start green penning and having a look through it. Okay.